Jude Wiesner. Jude Wiesner is a full-time writer living in Burnsville. She had a wonderful childhood growing up close to Lake Phelan. Previously, she published a memoir in the 2013 St. Paul Almanac. Jude is active in the writing community as a member of The Loft, WOW, Women of Words, Midwest Fiction Writers, and Romancing the Lakes. She heads off to Florida with her husband to visit her youngest of two sons whenever she can. Please welcome Jude.
I'm going to read two selections tonight. The first one is from this year's almanac, and it begins with early childhood memories. And I think what builds our lives and stitches our lives together are kind of the everyday events in our lives, not the dramatic things that happen, but the things that we build on and we can count on in our lives in each day. I grew up in the non-technology era, as you can probably well see. So my selection tonight is called The Thrilling Days of Yesteryear. Payne Avenue was a lively area, thrived with neighborhood shopping when I was little, and I was always anxious to take my mother's hand for the excursion. We would stop at the bank where a teller always produced a shiny new dime for me to slip into my pocket. It only stayed there momentarily while I scanned the aisles of the dime store for my newest selection. The butcher shop had sawdust on the floor and naked chickens laid on ice chips in the counter. Through the window to the back room, I could see slabs of meat that hung from hooks. The white-coated butchers might have blood on their sleeves, and I was never sure if I liked going there or not. Many mornings were spent at my grandmother's table sipping coffee that was mostly cream. They lived above us in my parents' small duplex on K Street. We stared at the radio and listened to the soap opera Ma Perkins, her Swedish family fitting neatly into our Scandinavian neighborhood. And then came television. An onslaught of neighborhood children queued up at the door to wait entry into our living room to commandeer the best spots for viewing. Some sat shoulder to shoulder on the sofa, others squeezed together in upholstered chairs, while the last to arrive were content to sit cross-legged on the floor. I always had the chair snug in the corner that had been subtly pushed up against the wallpaper to hide where I had colored in the stripes. With great anticipation, we stared at the test pattern. It occupied the screen each evening to alert us to the evening's show. Just what they tested was never really revealed, but we blindly accepted its necessity. With a flash of the screen and our drawn-in breath, the unseen narrator's words enthralled us. A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and the heavy, hearty hi-ho silver. The masked Lone Ranger was the uncontested hero. And we never once doubted that he and Tonto's ability to vanquish the bad guys. And then came the days when instead of the reassuring test pattern, a line streaked across the odd-shaped green screen. It was time to test the sausage-like tubes that nestled mysteriously in the back of the television. At the repair store, I crowded against my father and stretched to find my toes as he inserted each tube into a machine, and I waited wide-eyed for the results. We sighed in disappointment each time one passed the test and finally exclaimed in triumph when the faulty culprit was identified. Sometimes when I think back to those fond memories, I know the best of all was when the new tubes could not cure the television ills, and when the whole thing had to be gently lifted from its housing and left at the shop for repair. Television that night was the greatest. My father, Ollie, wedged himself into the back of the set and put on his own shows. I remember outlandish creations, stories about bears, and poems that made me shriek with laughter. The best were the songs that often reverted to Swedish as he sang and left me uncomprehending but giddy. My favorite sounded to me like Ria Ria Runka has to beat the bunka, Vaskaria Borta Fria. I never learned the real words and what they meant, but I never forgot them either. and I loved that silly old song. My dad was always my #1 top-rated TV show. As I grew up in the East Side, it, at that time as well as today, has always been a place of change and transition. And I think over the years, every nationality has at one time or other lived there. Excuse me. And my father was a builder, and so we moved to several houses as I grew up. As he built one, we moved in, and then he would sell it and build us another one, and we would migrate across the East Side until we finally landed at Lake Phelan. I could always consider us free-range children. We were not had appointments and schedules and everything scheduled and laid out for us like the children seem to today. We were allowed to leave the house by ourselves or with friends. Growing up at the lake in the summer was always an issue that we were told, because we lived at the lake, that if there were sirens, the rule was we had to come home and report that it was not for us. And so we would run as fast as we could, 2 blocks to my house, and scream it wasn't me, and run back so we didn't miss a thing at the activity at the beach. So as free-range children, the world was open to us. And I think children are really missing some of that world today. In 2013 Almanac, I had a selection called Summer Socks. The summer I turned 9 was filled with days spent with my 2 best friends, Punch and Dell. A day would begin at first light as I slipped through the house like a ghost after pulling on faded shorts and a too small shirt. Punch, Dell, and I had already hatched our plans late the night before, after our parents had checked on us thought the steel lumps in our beds meant we were sleeping. We tiptoed to windowsills, where starch curtains snapped in the breeze of summer nights. Our whispered messages carried like smoke on air currents across the street, unheard in living rooms below. The refrigerator light caused temporary blindness to my sleepy pupils as I groped for the glass bottle of milk. The milk, a day-old pastry, and a stem of green grapes were all that would sustain my whip-thin body for most of the day. I eased the screen door closed, stuffed the wire basket of my dilapidated blue Schwinn with my breakfast, and pedaled away before my father trumpeted his nose, a sure sign the day had begun. The 3 of us raced down the block, took the corner without braking, and rocketed through the park to Lake Phelan. I left my bike without a kickstand, I called it lean against her, propped against a tree. The milk cooled wedged in the sandy bottom of the lake while we scrambled up giant oak trees until we reached the uppermost branches and swayed in the wind. Our bodies offered little resistance. We weren't much for dolls that summer. We only resembled girls when we glued bottle caps to our sneakers and became tap dancers for a day. Instead, we were forest rangers, high wire walkers, or whatever game we conjured up. We told outrageous lies and made pinky squares to keep secrets just between us 3. At the rumble of our stomachs, we scrambled down the rough bark, adding new scrapes to our scab knees, and dared each other to jump from higher limbs. We waved at DeSoto and Ford coupes as they rounded the lake, and we hooted in delight when someone tooted their horn to break the morning silence. When we got tired of catching frogs and chasing grasshoppers, we mounted our bikes to speed off around the lake with our handlebar streamers flapping against bare, freckled arms. We coasted down the last hill, feet free of pedals, our stick legs stretched out to the sides. At Honeymoon Falls, we wedged off our red kids, stretched our socks off of our toes, and rolled them into tight little balls. Hiking to the top of the falls, we tossed our socks into the foamy water and raced down the rocky incline over the road to reach the stream before our socks popped out of the culvert on the other side. The first sock to surface won. Poor Punch. One sock got caught in the culvert every time. The summer's game ended when Punch's mother began to count her socks. And I am so pleased to know that Honeymoon Falls is back at the end of Lake Phelan. You still can't drive around it like we used to be able to do, but the falls is back. So that is a relief. Thank you.